Hey, storytelling Ron. I want to talk about the church and our freedom. Our freedoms are being eroded in Europe and in America because of the retreat or of the church, the failing of the church, the infiltration and attack on all sides against the church, the Catholic Church, the Protestant Church, whatever, the Christian Church. Everyone calls us white supremacists. The truth is, it's the church they're after. They're after Jesus Christ and ending the church. They want to return back to dictatorship, slavery, and paganism, which is Islamo-Marxism, is the same thing. It's the same end result. If you look at the history of man, our default is tyranny and slavery. That's the way it was in ancient history, and that's what it's returning to, slavery. Islam and Marxism are slavery. You don't have freedom of speech. You don't have individual rights. The Bible is what introduced individual rights. The Ten Commandments are about individual rights. The Sabbath, honor the Sabbath, is an individual right because it hurts the dictator. If the dictator has to give you one day off to rest and to worship your God, that undermines tyranny. That's an amazing little commandment that God said. And the first commandment is about, God doesn't even require you to worship him. He says, you will put no other gods before me. That's an amazing thing. So that's like a declaration, a challenge to man. If you're not going to worship me, you cannot be a god. You cannot replace me with another god. That's all he's saying. So that's almost a challenge to atheists. Let's see if you can be without me and don't have any other idols. That's the second commandment. It's like an emphasis of the first. Don't blaspheme. That commandment is basically, it's to not blaspheme God, but it also is a culture where we don't insult and mock and scoff and blaspheme each other. And then the four others that are about individual rights, adultery and honoring the mother and father. Well, those are good too, but those are family. So let me do the other four. Don't murder. God doesn't want us to murder each other. That's so you have a right to life. Above kings, above dictatorships, above gulags and jihad, you have a right to live. Don't steal. You have a right and covet. You have a right to your property and your things. So Islamo-Marxists can't come in and just take all your stuff. It's like two laws, because Marxism is the whole coveting thing, coveting your wife, your family, and your property. When the government takes all of that, you have no rights. Your art, your books, whatever you create, that's capitalism. Capitalism is to own your own capital. And the Islamo-Marxists cannot stand that you get to own your own. When you own your own capital, that's where ingenuity and innovation comes from. If the whole world is full of slaves, there's no innovation. There's no need for innovation. There's no need to make better farming tools if you have slaves. Slavery not only enslaves the slave, but it enslaves everyone's minds, because we just use slaves then. We don't need to innovate and create technology. The whole reason for technology in the West is because we got rid of slavery, and so we had to innovate and figure out ways to do things without mass labor. What are the other ones? Don't murder, don't steal, don't covet, and the other human one is don't bear false witness. Islam and Marxists can certainly lie, and that's a part of their agenda, calling us fascists, calling us white supremacists. They continue to lie. And even in Islam, there's a taqiyya. You can lie until you're strong enough to overcome. Marxists, communists, they use the tactic of deception to fool the youth, the working party, and to attack those who are in power, that they want their power. Bearing false witness to destroy us is part of the Islamo-Marxist tenet. It is not part of our Christian tenet. We cannot bear false witness. Think of the judicial system. We know that in places like D.C., Washington, D.C., there will never be a fair trial because everyone there doesn't give a shit. They want to bear false witness, and it's all about the agenda. Their juries, their judges, the judges of the left is all about agenda. It's not about seeking the truth. On the right, we notice on Christians, we notice there's sort of a half and half. There's sort of everyone's sort of trying to interpret and figure it out and do the right thing according to their interpretation of the Bible or whatever. And we notice that on the right with conservatives, but on the left, it's always about the agenda. They're going to argue. They're gonna be bitter, but in the end, they're gonna vote for the murderer. They're gonna pull that lever for the murder of the unborn. They always will vote for their agenda. Muslims, communists, socialists will always vote the same. Trans, they will always vote the same, knowing their suicide, knowing their death. So, I want to get to what that's. So my screaming agenda here, my clanging like a cymbal or banging like a gong is about telling you that we have to go back to church and have a church culture and make and teach each other fellowship and our youth, especially our young men, to go out and fight and rebuke this evil in the society. And I have been studying church history and seeing that is the case. It is the church that brings about reform, peace, individual rights, strength in a pagan world, in a horrible slavery pagan world. The church is what has changed us and made us the West, civilized. They want to call it white supremacy, but I'm going to show you what it really is. This is a map of church. Church in 300 AD was right around here. 500 AD, it started to spread and even got to England because the early popes, Pope Gregory, I believe, he really was enamored by the slaves that he called angels, English angels. He called them angels, and he actually bought some slaves, young boys, trained them as monks, and then created a whole mission team that went to England because he loved their blonde hair. He was really intrigued by them. That's, of course, pagans will claim that's gay, but he wanted to spread the church. And oddly enough, the church was really strong in England in 6th, 7th century, when the Vikings came down and attacked them. So that's amazing. Actually, around 6th century too, or 4th, 5th, how Constantine had and the Catholics or the Christians here had formed a church, had got the Bible solidified with the Nicene Council and all that. But the real church around 3rd or 4th century, I was reading about this, there was only like a few hundred left or whatever. It was very small in Rome, I believe. And the rest of it was heresies. And it was amazing. And then there's this amazing come around the rear trick by the Christians to get the heresies defeated. I forgot the heretical church that was there for that totally had all the Slavs and the barbarians and all that. The heresy was the Arians, I believe, Arians or something like that. Anyway, but it was huge, and the real church, following the Bible with the Nicene Creed, was only like a small group in Rome for at the 3rd or 4th century. Anyway, 6th, 7th century. Think about it. The church was only in this area in England. That's it. 6th, 7th century. 1000 AD. It was here. Now, okay, I take that back. It was definitely spreading in the Middle East, but that was getting conquered by Islam and wiped out. So around 1000 AD, the church had nearly been wiped out. The Christians that were running this area. What's that? I got an alarm for something. Oh, I'm gonna go hang out with. Oh, that's last week. Okay, let me turn that off. That was a financial meeting last week. I'm just gonna work on my phone here because that's how pro I am. Okay. The church gets wiped out. All these Christians. There was even a whole bunch of infighting along the churches, from Italy to Africa, and that was pretty amazing. All right, quick break there. I had to go help the wife. Okay, so when in Rome, in North Africa, I remember reading that there was this heresy in Africa, and so the church went to go, help them or educate them, and they got murdered by these dagger wielding Christians, and the church was like, dang. And I was reading that, I was like, dang, this is like a precursor to Islam, because they were so violent towards the church of Rome that the church in North Africa was a heretical and violent and bloodthirsty. So there was that little, bit there that I read. But the it was amazing how the church not only had to go up against paganism and the default paganism and tyranny of the people, but it had to go up against so many heresies. That was incredible. How did the church and the Bible even survive that? And I was reading about how there was just so little of the church left for a little while there. So that's an incredible, frightening, thing that needs to be studied more. It's not, there's probably a ton of studying. I just haven't studied it. I've always, spent all my time studying Dungeons and Dragons and Marvel and Warner Bros. DC. I've spent very little time studying church history, which is such a bummer because it's sort of crazy and amazing. And I just want to learn more. But around 1000 AD, the churches were here, and that was it, right? Islam has already wiped out all of this. Islam has already taken over Spain and has hit France, even up to Paris. The Battle of Tours is 730. Islam had gotten that far. So Christendom was barely here around 1000 AD, right? And in England. Think about that. So around 1000 AD, there were Christians here, but they were being, Islam was taken over. And the reconquest by Spain to retake, the Catholic Church retaken, that was a 700-year war. 700 years it took them to retake it from Islam. So, and of course, I think they became, they obviously became a little more zealot for the Catholic Church. We know because of the Spanish Empire, but I'm kind of fine with that. Anyway, so the Catholics were really strong in this area. The Protestants, after the Bible was started print, the reason we have a printing press is for the Bible, and there was no slaves, so we couldn't enslave a bunch of people to copy the Bible. So we invented the printing press because of the love and desire to create the Bible and make it accessible to everyone. That was in the 1400s. By 1600, Protestants started exploding because we had access to the Bible. Because before then, think about it, we didn't have access to the Bible. That was only for the priests in the churches, and that was it. So no one actually read the Bible before then. That we learned everything through the priests. I really don't have a desire to fight or argue with Catholics. I'm an ex-Catholic. I love Catholics. I think I think they're wrong about much of their beliefs, and the church is wrong, and the church today, Catholic Church today, is not looking great. But it's not really they're the least of my worries. I don't even have a worry over Catholics, but I'm just going to be just blunt about the things that I know as a Protestant or whatever. And even Protestants, there's plenty of bad Protestants out there. There's plenty of false Christians. So, and there's plenty of good Christians and good Catholics. So I'm like, but anyway, around 1000, 1200, 1400 AD, the church has only been established in these areas. Okay, the rest of the world has no church. There's no church in this area, Africa. There's no church in the Middle East anymore. It's being wiped out by Islam. There's like a smattering. There's churches obviously coming across this way, but very, always in the minority. And then, of course, barely. There's like one Mongol who became Christian or whatever, but that was it. So think about that. So where does all of our freedoms of human liberty come from? Where does democracy come from? I mean, people say that democracy started in Greece. I am going to fight that because the 700 BC, 500 BC, when democracy sort of started in Greece, supposedly, guess who was there in so big of numbers that they had to translate the Hebrew Old Testament into Greek, because of how many Jews were in Greece in the 4th, 5th century BC. So the Greeks, being open to all religions as paganism is, most certainly heard and read the Bible, the Old Testament, in Greek, the Septuagint. The Septuagint was translated and done, and the Jews were obviously part of the paganism where they can go and talk and teach about their beliefs. The description of a republic is in the Bible. Moses' father-in-law teaches him about a republic, about a democracy, and to replace the king. And that is the first description of one. And then guess where it happens? In Greece. Okay, because those are the only people that have access to the Old Testament beyond the Jews and Hebrews, because the Old Testament was in Hebrew only. So the only other place where Jews were common and had the language of the locals was in Greece. What do you know? And that's the place where democracy started, where individual rights were sort of thought about. And so I'm a little annoyed that that's never brought up anymore. You know, that correlation, because that's nowhere else. Now, people, yes, I get that pagan tribes will have voting, but it's voting amongst the leaders, you know, amongst them and they're all in a power play anyway. It's voting amongst dictators. That's all it is. It's not an actual representative type of government. And so that happened here. The only place where civilization and universities, schools, orphanages, hospitals were in the Middle East. But think about this: Jews and Christians were there before Muslims, so the hospitals were being created by them, by the churches in there. And then of course Islam took over and then the other thing too is that Jews and Persians and Christians were there before Islam, and they say, oh, Islam invented algebra, which is bullcrap. I know they just, these people were just part of an education system that they had just conquered. They conquered the churches that were forming educational centers. And the whole reason we Christians want education is because we want our people to read the Bible. We want them to read the Bible. So we create these universities as seminaries. All the universities that were popping up were about teaching young children how to read the Bible. All the monasteries that had children, monasteries were actually filled with orphans, enslaved orphans who they had bought and taken and raised them for the purpose of being monks. But in order to be a monk, you got to learn how to read the Bible. We want them to read. So the education system and the civilizing of the world was through the churches, all spreading out around here. And think about this: the default of man is slavery. So if there's slavery or tyranny happening, where do you think you go to find help against tyranny? Like in a civilized or in your own tribe or country, where are you going to go? Are you going to go to the government, the king, because there's tyranny and do you think you're going to get a fair shake? What about the judges who are chosen by the king or the rulers? Do you think you're going to get a fair shake there in the legal system there, in the policing system? You're going to flee to or hide or find sanctuary at churches, because the churches are going to seek for justice. The church is the only place that's going to seek justice, not an agenda. Like the left is always about the agenda. The Islamo-Marxists. Are you going to go to a mosque? Because the mosque is not going to seek justice for you. The mosque is going to seek to get more power through you, or to enslave you and give them more power. They always have an agenda. It's always the taqiyya agenda. Taqiyya being deceive until you have enough power to take over. So in Islam, that is their truth. Their truth is we're going to lie and deceive and seek power. So everything they post when they know they're lying is beautiful Islamic truth to them. But it's all about power. Same with communism. They don't mind accusing of their own fascism, their own tyranny, because why not? There's no God to them. In the church is the only place you're going to find wisdom being the desire for justice for everyone. And so churches were spreading and helping create a form of rights, human rights, liberty, compassion. It's all here, and that's why they hate the West. They call it the white supremacists. They say that because they don't want to say church, because they're going to reveal their hand. And if they reveal their hand, they're going to make the church even stronger if they say we hate the church and want to fight the church. Because they know if they oppress the church, which they used to do, but they don't want to do that anymore because they want to hide that they're doing that. If they say they're oppressing the church, then the church will explode, because that's what has happened in the past. And that's why they never say that. They say white supremacists, because they need to divide. They need to divide the Christians, divide and conquer. And so they're never going to reveal that they hate Jesus Christ. Specifically. I mean, they're going to come out with it here and there because they're weak. But overall, the Islamo-Marxists are never going to say outward they're coming to destroy Christianity. I mean, they do say it, but I'm just saying, when they are in positions of political debate and confrontation, they're not going to expose that that's what they're really after. And they don't even, for themselves, they don't even care to know that truth. As long as they're destroying the white people, the white supremacists, and if the church has to be the part of that collateral damage, they're fine with that. But the truth is, it's the church they're after. They don't attack. You notice they don't attack Africa. They don't attack the tyrannies of Africa or Nigeria, where horrible things are happening. They don't attack the slavery and the destruction of the women and homosexualities in the Middle East. They don't attack that. They don't attack the poverty and the horrific slavery of the caste system in India. They're not going to attack that. They're not going to attack the communism and the slavery and the wretchedness of the third world over here. They're not going to attack that. They're not going to attack Japan and it's sort of whatever. It's fine. They're going to attack this. This is what they got to attack, because this is Christianity. They got to attack this. They got to attack the U.S. Attack. They got to attack Europe and take it over. They got to flood it with their minions, their inbred Muslim men who have no wives, because all the wives are taken up by the polygamists, the harems of the powerful. And these powerful Muslim imams and sheiks and all that, they're financing this whole shift of their armies, their slave inbred armies of youth into the church, Christendom. And we're letting it happen. That's the biggest problem. We're letting it happen. This movie is called The Mission, and Jeremy Irons was in it. And this is back in the 80s. But this movie is really good because it's historically a historical depiction. It's it really happened. But this movie, there's kind of a nudity here, but that's fine. This movie is about what this really reveals. I like the film because it shows that the church went there and this tribe converted. They were totally Christian. They were freaking Protestant Christian, like really learned. But the powers that be basically abandoned them so that the Portuguese could come in and enslave them again. The Spanish Catholic Church had to abandon it, and the Jesuits helped with fight their own church and Catholic empire to try to keep the tribe free. That's the church. The church is not about the power structure. The church is about freedom, about the truth. And the Jesuits did try to help them and did like a bit of a whatever fight or whatever, but they failed, and the powers that be took over now and enslaved the people. And here's the thing, the world is going to blame the church for this, or the Catholics and the Christians in the church. They're going to blame them, but these people were wanting freedom and not to be enslaved because of the church, because of the Jesuits there that were teaching them about Christ. The people in power is what took it over and re-enslaved them. And it wasn't the church. The church was too weak. They were too afraid, and they didn't stand up for what they really wanted because of the empire, the Spanish Empire and the Portugal Empire. They didn't want to have a big war or whatever. So they were just trying to work out these deals on a global scale. And the church is just trying to get, the smaller parts of the church are just trying to keep people free. And this is the left does not want to look at human nature and the nuances and the story, the amazing stories with struggles. They don't want to look at that. They just want to look at they're right, church is wrong, destroy the church, get rid of it. We're going to slave everyone. We're not going to outward say that, but that's just what they are. The end of the Spear movie. This is an amazing movie too. You guys got to check it out. And there's a documentary about it as well. But it's a true story, and the movie was done in a true way. The father or this man here came to be a missionary, and they killed him because they're a violent tribe. And the tribes in this area were all gang warfare, vengeance tribes. And his family ended up coming to them and converting them, the son of the man that they killed. And it's an amazing story. And the tribe guy said, if the Christians had not come, we would have, the tribes would have had killed each other because of the revenge. And if you notice, like in Hollywood, all these movies are about revenge. It's all about revenge. The default action movie of like assassins, that become good, or heroes that become good, or whatever. They all are about revenge. Whereas in Christianity, it's about forgiveness. The cycle of man, by default, the pagans, is revenge. Across globally, all the tribes, all the wars are about revenge. It's Christians coming in and saying, forgive. We need to forgive and become civilized. And you got to have churches in every corner of every community for that to happen. Think about it. If you don't have churches in your local neighborhoods, people will begin a cycle of revenge over and over and over that will never end. And whether it's property or a livelihood or murder, revenge is the default of the human heart. But it's the church that has been stopping that in Europe, and here in South America, it was the tribes were all about revenge against each other. And this movie, it depicts that and how the Christians came in and changed that. And today, the Christians those tribes are amazing. The guy's old now. The son, I think he might have passed away, but he's at that stage of being very old. He's like 80 something. But he helped them bring. He brought the chief to America, and it was humorous. He gave them a bicycle, those flying planes, they're like the flying hover bicycles, so they could fly in and get some medicine and fly back into the tribes, and he brought them Christianity so that they could become like their own missionaries around the area and seeking peace and amongst the other tribes and stuff. And it's just an amazing story. The Black Robe is done about the same time as The Mission. This is a very dark and sad movie, but I still like its depiction of the difficulties of being a missionary, and my games are about that, the difficulties of being a missionary and failing and bad things happening. But it showed the brutal nature of the natives and then their suffering, and I understand they did certainly suffered, but the church, and this movie is kind of a flimsy whatever, but I still liked it. I still liked the depiction of the Indians were pretty rough in here, and it was very kind of muddled, the story, I guess, because it was very depressing towards the end even, but it showed that the missionaries had just such a difficult time. But we did it. We converted a lot of people. We spread across the world. We colonized. We evangelized. I still think this is a good show just to watch, and it was kind of interesting. Not probably not definitely not one of the better ones, but there's so few missionary movies out there. Yet the entire story of our Christianity is mission work. And yet we have so few movies about that. But I'm doing movies as opposed to books because I only have read a couple of books, and movies are just more quick visuals and stuff. But it showed the craziness of the Indians and their little witch shaman here or whatever, shaman. But I was definitely intrigued by this film. Okay, another one that I really like. This came out recently, and this was really good. And I was like, whoa. They showed the cannibalism and brutality of the Maori. And the Maori are very Christian today. So that is awesome. And they're fighting Islam in New Zealand. So I'm pretty wow. But this one shows like two tribes of Maoris trying to kill each other and cannibalize and torture each other. They tortured each other. And this is the norm, about Native Indians, even here in America. The norm was to brutally torture and kill your warrior opponents. And it was a form of entertainment, and they tortured them as long as they could to see how long they could last being tortured. So what does that mean by being tortured? Being skinned, pulling off their skin while they're alive, a genitalia torture, splinters in the nails, whatever torture they used, cutting off digits. You got to know what torture is. And they did it to these people and did it to each other, and they ate them, cannibalized them, and that was the norm. And this was a back and forth of revenge and tyranny. And it was this one, the layman pastor. Layman is he's a volunteer or whatever, civilian pastor, coming to this area and then interacting with these people. And that was amazing. There was action. There was war. They did some fun action scenes. A lot of really cool battles, but it was Maori against Maori for the most part. But there was some cool other cool stuff in there. But this was a great movie. I really enjoyed this film. As a Christian, I really enjoyed this film. It shows and the guy who made it, I think it was a Maori, and he just wanted to show how brutal they were. They were a warrior class, just like Islam is today, warriors, jihadis, and they wanted to kill each other, and they wanted to keep killing. And yes, there were plenty of corrupt white Christian men, and he planning the church in his own white community had racial issues, and it was good. It was a good. I don't mind. I have no problem with criticism of Christians in church. I want just remember I'm a wise man. I want justice for everybody. So I want anything that the church did wrong, I want it to be open and documented and revealed. Islam does not want justice for everyone. Islam wants only justice for Islam, and to push Islam and to hide its horrific brutality and terror across the globe. It wants to cover that up and just talk about how awesome Islam is. I, as a Christian, want to say this: we are all sinners. We are all failures before Christ. So we all need to take a step back and not have power over each other and not control each other. And we all need to have a church where we have fellowship and we work things out. Islam is not like that at all. Islam is a cult because every imam and every local leader controls their group or whatever. But this is a great movie, The Convert. I highly recommend it. It was awesome. This and a couple of crazy, scary monster beasts that they worship will make a perfect, Dark Ages or for the Lord RPG game if you want to come up a story like that. But yeah, so I just want to bring this up. This is a great way of showing how a church comes into an area and changes them slowly through many mistakes, through many hypocrisies of the Christians as well, through the perseverance of the pastor, the mission, being a missionary, being an evangelist. Just an amazing story. So I highly recommend The Convert. So I just want to emphasize again that we have to plant churches. We have to strengthen our churches. The churches are being corrupted. It warns us in the book of Jude that they're going to be corrupted by the lustful, by the gay, the progressives. I'm joyful, though. I'm joyful in Christ. I'm going to church today. I'm going to spend a lot of time today at church. I'm going to go pretty soon. Shoot. And so I'm joyful for that Jesus came down, walked amongst us, and suffered our fate. He suffered torture, brutalized torture, death, to show us, he died for our sins. It's something Jews and Christians understand. But to the non-believers, he showed us that he has lived through our pain and suffering, and he still loves us. And there's an afterlife, and there's a heaven. There is something after this. So he's gone through it. He's gone through death, through pain, through torture, to show us that he loves us and that he created this world. He knows it sucks. He knows there's death. He knows there's pain and suffering. He knows that we have a game of life here, a challenge to live, but he's lived it. And he suffered, and he didn't pull out his holy hand grenade to save himself. He went through it with us. So he's gone through it, and there is an afterlife, a heaven. So that's the joy. That's him dying for our sins, proving to us how much he loves us, how much God loves us. He's actually doing it for us. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to go out and murder anybody. We don't have to kill anybody. We don't have to convert anybody. We just have to spread the message, and we don't even have to spread the message. Because we have different gifts in the church, but be part of a church. Use your gifts. Don't think of church as like a slavery or an enslavement of you. Find ways you want to help the church, joyful ways you want to help the church. If the church tries to get you to do soup kitchen or mopping or whatever, and you don't want to do that, fine, don't do it. Be a little stubborn, but look for ways to help the church. In your hobbies, in your joy. I would say help them manually if you can, but if not, give them money, so someone else can get paid to do it. But serve the church. All right. That's my message. Craziness. We need to get back to a church culture. The craziness that we see, why people are the way they are, why the Islamos and Marxists are working together and continually avoiding the truth for their agenda, is because they're not part of the church. They're not part of God. They're not part of truth and justice. They're not part of that. They're all for agenda, and so is Satan. It's all about agenda for them. All right, in the game of life, you got to roll holy dice.